What if George Washington became president in 2025? Imagine, the first US president suddenly appears in our modern world. He sees smartphones, social media, metal birds in the sky, and chaos. How would he react? What choices would he make? And most importantly, how would he handle TikTok? George Washington, born in 1732, was America's very first president. He served 2 terms, stepped down willingly, and helped set up the role of president. He wrote a lot of letters, loved farming, and wore military uniforms. Let's imagine Washington wakes up in 2025. He's confused, his powdered wig slightly crooked, and he's surrounded by self-driving cars and people talking into Bluetooth headsets. Quickly, he sees inflation, war, climate change, and Congress arguing over TikTok bans. So, what now? Well, he definitely instituted an executive order for you to subscribe if you enjoy this video. Washington always aimed to unite people. He warned against political parties and foreign entanglements. He believed in honesty, service, and staying grounded. And in today's world, he'd likely delete the presidential social media accounts immediately and start his first speech with, "Ye noble citizens of this fledgling republic." What happened? But instead of panicking, he'd get to work. Climate change, he'd review the data, take a deep breath, and say, "Let's plant trees." Global conflicts, he'd write some very formal and very serious letters. Political division, he'd hate it, but he'd try to bring people together. He might even create a unity party founded on principles like mutual respect, common sense, and a firm belief that all problems can be solved with a strong pen. Though technology would baffle him at first, Washington was smart and curious. He'd eventually figure out tablets and maybe even ditch his courier for an Apple Watch. That is, if his 18th century brain could handle that sort of thing. But his emails, still formal. "To whom it may concern, I request jellied eels and a salop. With great respect, G. Washington." When it comes to the more complicated side of technology though, social media definitely wouldn't be his thing. If someone insulted him online, he'd write a lengthy, respectful reply and publish it in the newspaper instead of tweeting about it. Now, how would he handle modern issues? In general, he'd be surprised at the lack of hands-on action required for today's government. In his day, after inducing a tax on whiskey to help pay for the Revolutionary War, he personally led troops throughout Pennsylvania to stop a rebellion of angry people. But today, he'd find that half the time, it's basically expected that the president can just go golfing during important events, although horseback riding might be his preferred sport. With climate change, I know he loved nature, so hopefully Mount Vernon will go solar. But in order to get that done, you'd have to stop him from bringing back slave quarters like there were in the 1700s. Because, yes, no matter how good of a leader he was, the idea that he'd have to live without his 300 or so slaves would probably be a shock to his system. When it comes to healthcare, he saw way too many soldiers die young in the battles he attended, so he'd likely support better access for everyone. With gun control, as a general, he respected weapons, but believed in responsibility. He'd most likely support some more sensible rules on that front. Finally, while handling political division, which he warned about in his farewell address, he'd have to give a very serious talk and ask us all to chill. Once he's done laying down the law with speeches and letters, maybe Washington would take a moment to dip his toe into modern pop culture, because what better way to understand America today than sitting down on a late night talk show? "Mr. President, have you seen any memes before?" And then good old Georgie raises his eyebrow and says, "In my time, we called those political cartoons." Okay, that one might not hit well, but he might even go viral for his calm, serious reactions. He wouldn't understand the trend, but he would at least appreciate the effort. He might also be surprised by how global the presidency has become. Today, he'd be expected to navigate complex international alliances, manage global crises, and possibly Zoom with the world leaders from the Situation Room. Though it would be overwhelming, Washington's strong sense of duty and respect for cooperation would likely guide him well on the world stage. So, could George Washington actually lead the country today? It would definitely be a shock at first, but with his wisdom, humility, and poise under pressure, he'd probably find his footing. He'd ask us to come together, listen more, argue less, and maybe even write a few more letters. And if nothing else, he would absolutely bring powdered wigs back into fashion.